Thank you, Sarah, for taking this opportunity with us to introduce and have this little conversation. I'm Justin Gong from XAG, and this is Sarah. Can you talk about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I'm Sarah Hovinga. I am a regulatory policy analyst with Bayer Crop Science for our digital farming initiatives, and so that includes drones and all of the things you would think of in terms of digital connection of agriculture. And a lot of what my role is doing is really looking, 5 to 10 years out in the future. We know that technologies like drones are going to be extremely important for all of the societal and environmental benefits that we really want to look for, but we need to understand how to incorporate them into our regulatory frameworks, not only in the US, but all around the world. So that's what I focus on.
Well, thank you. I think Bayer is already ahead of anyone else because we've been working together since 2017. Back then we met the Bayer team in China, and then we started a tour in Germany, and then we start working together in Japan, actually working with your formulation team to find out the best solution for drone spray. And it's been more than 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of what the Asia team in Bayer, but also in CropLife Asia and elsewhere, have been really ahead of the curve, I would say, and really innovators, because there, from what I understand from the Asia teams, it was an immediate, obvious benefit. You have like an applicator that's in a hot, wet rice field, dressed in Tyvek, applying a pesticide, and it's just when there's a drone and the spray operations can be disassociated physically from one another, it just makes so much sense. And so just again to really help the smallholder farmers. And
the whole idea is we want to attract the young generation farmers back to the field. If they still wearing the backpack to spray, it's not their future. They don't want it. And we can see so many smallholder farmers in Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, China. Their need for their family is to keep growing food, right? And we need them too, because the different condition of agriculture. And so, I'm curious, what's the vision of Bayer in the US in terms of the drones and the future farming?
Yeah. Well, I think drones are a very interesting use case because it brings together these two worlds, right? That maybe have historically been developing maybe in silos, if we can say that. So you have the people that have been more traditionally in, farmers, agriculture, and all of the pesticide education and everything and training that goes into that. But then drones, you introduce that into the picture. Maybe you have people that don't know anything about the pesticide space, but they know about drones. They know about geofencing. They know about the proper placement of a pilot and, and an operator, for example, and the team, and how to abide by FAA regulations and things like that. And now we're bringing together these two different worlds, which is why conferences that we're at are so important, right? Because you have that sharing. And for us, drones as a use case is important, but it's not only about the drone itself, it's about kind of this larger picture of precision application.
Right.
And how can we think differently so you don't have to have a worst case scenario? If a farmer has a piece of their land that, is fine to apply, but then for some reason in the label or in the overall risk assessment, it's just not allowed because they're doing it on a county-wide basis, for example, and not even a farm-specific or even sub-field specific basis, as will become important with things like Endangered Species Act. I think that's where drones as a case study, but then also other precision application techniques will really be needed.
Yes, I really appreciate your thoughts on that, because we see a lot of case in terms of farmer really want to use it, and drone is really good at doing this, but they couldn't use it because of there's not enough study, or not enough, the regulations not allowed. So we are also trying to help the smaller farmers worldwide to be able to use access to the new technologies. And also our story also starts with drone and paralleled with the cotton, right? 10 years ago we find out cotton defoliation is so important, so the farmers can adopt the harvester, right? But they need to spray efficiently at the same time to the cotton. Manual spray is just too tedious and hard work. So we start using drones, and the development actually coming from Bayer, back then, and we did a lot of research. After 2 years, it worked. So that's why the cotton harvester can really be introduced to the farmers, smaller farmers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's why we're very excited that we're starting to see more and more science, more and more data behind a lot of what these technologies can do, because that's really what's going to make the difference at the end of the day in terms of changing the regulations. You know, EPA, FAA, they can't just decide to change regulations based on assumptions. You really need the scientific data to support. And so that's where, you know, we have human safety teams, we have environmental safety teams, not only in Bayer, but in other pesticide registrant companies. It's more or less organized the same, let's say, and we really are understanding what data needs to be generated so that we can advocate for incorporating things like drones into the overall regulatory risk assessment.
Yeah, so Sarah, from your point of view, will the labeling process being easier, or, you know, is it gonna change for the next couple of years?
I think we just got off of a session where we were talking a lot about labeling and drones, and I think it's going to take a large activation energy. So at first it's going to seem really hard, which is maybe what we're experiencing right now, because we're all coming together. We're at a discovery phase, understanding the technology, and then the technology continues to change because folks like yourself continue to, you know, that's why you're here probably also, is to listen to what feedback the users give you, and so then then it continues to develop. But I think for us, you know, there wasn't even a baseline, for example, to start with, like for things like drift, for things like operational practices. And so as much as we can establish what is that baseline, who cares if it's on a T30, who cares if it's on, eventually we get to something that is a baseline for what we then start building from. And when you have models that start to look at, okay, how do 4 propellers matter to 2 to 6 to, you know, you can start modeling that stuff, and so then it doesn't take the boots on the ground research, so to say, because you have the computer models that can do that for you.
That's
and
what
really
we've
start
been
to
doing
understand.
for 10 years.
Exactly.
Modeling,
and
you know, blind tests and trials in the field. I think we can also help on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I understand CropLife Asia as well has a large task force. And, you know, I'm really impressed. One thing that I hope that we can start to incorporate more and more here in the US is really understanding how to incorporate all of the learnings. And so there's a global registrant task force called the Unmanned Aerial Pesticide Application System Task Force. And so they're really focused on establishing the baseline on drift, and so that's going on right now. There's also work on the best management practices, and so we're hoping that as much as we can get a lot of these best practices out in the world and really promote, you know, what needs to be done for safe and effective drone applications, we can continue to grow the field together. And then once there's best management practices that are agreed upon, and again, data to support why we're recommending the flight operations we do, why we're recommending the, you know, logistical placement of even the people, the mixing of the chemicals that we do, that's when label language starts to be formed. And so I think that that's why we're really focused on needing to align as that, because we're a pesticide industry, but there's drone providers, there's nozzle providers, there's professional drone contract companies, and we need to all be working on this together.
It's going to be an ecosystem that to work together to help the farmers adopt the new technology, as well as protecting the environment, reducing the chemical usage, and so on. So what's your long-term vision on using drone technology, helping farmers, but on the side, another side of impact on the sustainability?
Yeah, I think that's really long-term, you know, where we want to go. I put myself in the shoes of someone, for example, that knows nothing about agriculture, but I'm going to the store and I want to know how my apple was grown, or I want to know, you know, how the worker practices were in this, and the traceability. How was this produced? Am I being a good global citizen supporting this apple that I'm finding at the store? And, you know, I'm not saying that every single thing has to be visible, but what are those key societal benefits that we're really trying to address, like sustainability.
Yes.
Like I care about pollinator safety.
Right.
Like how do I know that this was utilized in, you know, in relation to that, for
Yes,
example?
yes.
And so if we have things like this digitally connected
Yes,
system,
yes.
you know, I know it was done in this way. I know it has a sustainability label on it. Let's
Yeah,
say
yeah.
that, you know, I feel good about like the food that I'm buying at the store. And so
Yes.
I feel like that's like the long-term vision, is how do we connect all of these pieces so that there's more understanding about agriculture and understanding about the important technologies that are
Yes.
coming into it.
At XAG, we call this new fair trade, because if we know a farmer's, you know, being a good practice of his farmland, you know, doing good to the environment, we should pay him, you know, higher value on his produce, right? And so actually Bayer inspired us. The first time we visit Bayer R&D Center in Wuhan, we saw your what's called the farm. What's the name of the farm? I forgot.
Hofian.
Yeah,
Hofian farm.
Hofian farm.
Yep.
And we saw the bees hotel.
Yes,
right?
yes.
You put logs and drill holes, and so when you're doing the spray, the bees can hide in the bees hotel, and it's really inspiring us. And we also learned in your formulation, you carefully, you know, formulate the knockdown agents and the clean agents to make sure the bees can, you know, escape from the sprays. Yeah, we also did a lot of testing, you know, facilities to make sure our droplets, you know, meets your standards of design. Yeah.
Well, and there's also a component of like connecting, like there is tons of information that's known about bees,
Yes,
for example.
yes.
And like that's why you have on labels like don't
Yeah.
apply when flowering, because there's
Right.
going to be bees
Yes,
present, you know,
yes.
there're going to be bees.
Yes.
And so knowing and abiding by the label, because all of that information really had to undergo heavy scrutiny in order to be on
Yeah.
the label, both from the pesticide registrant
Right.
perspective, but also
Yeah.
from the regulator perspective. But then if you take into consideration, it's raining today,
Yeah.
or the wind is blowing,
Yeah.
like there might not be pollinator activity. That's not in the regulations now, it's
Right.
not in label language now,
Yeah.
but if we can use again some of this site-specific information to really inform the
Yes.
decision making, we're not
Yes.
telling people what to do, but we're making it easier with the complexity
Right.
of the world.
Yes.
That and
Yes.
how do you make the best application that you can.
Yes, mention about the decision making. I think farmers today are really vulnerable to the climate change, right? So it's all about how to help them to make climate resilient, you know, when they making decisions on growing food, right? So we are also trying to set up a new modeling methodology to help farmers to understand the weather, the climate, and the soil as well. I think Bayer is also doing something with like climate and right, digital farming
Yes.
decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to understand which indicators. There's a lot of work going on the metrics. You know, what metrics do we use
Yes.
because if it's a new market like carbon, if it's a new market like sustainability, we have to ensure that the metrics are also backed up by, you know, the science, and
Yes.
it's not just a random label. I won't mention specific entities,
Yes.
but like a label on food that maybe makes someone feel good but doesn't actually mean anything scientifically.
True, true.
Yeah.
And I also had a very interesting story about, you notice these drones, they are
Yes.
the same drones but with different payload system, right?
Yes.
This one is sprayer, and this one is spreader. So in the UK, in order to get the certification of allowing our drones to spray herbicide, this is very difficult to get approval for herbicide because it's got a, you know, impact on the environment and the native plants, right? One of our users in the UK is doing this. He used the sprayer to spray herbicide, but after the spray, he used the spreader, so the same drone but swap the payload system to spread the native plant seeds. So the good flowers, good seed, you know, good plants can come back again after they kill, you know, all the weeds they need, and this really helped him to get approval from the government and the local council.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we want to doing something, you know, like this to set a standard, you know, or a procedure. And you know, if we can work with Bayer and you know, like you have seeds, you have herbicide, right? You have the team on that. I think the farmers will be much easier to adopt those technologies.
Yeah. I think that's really going to be, I mean, not only for drones, but just for precision application in general. In the US at least, it really needs to be farmer driven.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
because, I mean, in different countries you might have regulatory systems that are maybe a little bit more restrictive, and
Yes.
that's why the farmers are adopting technologies like that, which that's fine.
Yes.
That's the way it is in those countries. But in the US, in this current regulatory environment, you know, you really need the farmer to say, you know, like you were talking about vision. I imagine one day, you know, the farmer has, okay, I'm going to use my airplane for this application because that's the best way that I'm going to apply. Oh no, you know, I have power lines, or it's raining and muddy, or I only have this little zone, you know, use the drone, or, you know, actually I have a huge piece of land, I need to use my tractor. And so you have all the tools. I mean, that's what we try to do as a company too. We have seeds, we have pesticides, we have digital tools. And so we're trying to give the grower, the farmer, the tools they need to make the best decisions they can. Again, not dictating, but really enabling the decision. And so I could imagine that on the application side as well, for example.
It's all about enabling farmers. To empower them. To produce better food for our sustainable future. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's good?
Yay!